Halting heroin, a 9 on your side at 7 special report. With a recent spike in heroin overdoses, we're digging into the growing problem and how we move forward from here. Good evening, everyone. I'm Craig McKee. Thank you for joining us tonight. With dozens of overdoses and 3 deaths so far just this week, it appears the heroin crisis has reached a whole new level here in Cincinnati. And that's why we're devoting the entire half hour to this problem and what can be done to halt heroin in the Tri-State. Just take a look at some of the numbers here. It's staggering. There have been 90 heroin overdoses in Hamilton County alone since Tuesday. Today, there were 2 more. Yesterday, there were 24, 2 of them fatal. And Wednesday saw 43 with 1 fatality. And Tuesday, 21 overdoses. That's a lot of numbers, folks. Tonight, you're going to hear from a panel of community leaders. Captain Maurice Robinson with Cincinnati Police is here. State Representative Denise Driehaus also here. Interim Cincinnati Health Commissioner Dr. Odell Owens and Addiction Specialist Dr. Clifford Kabansag. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you in just a moment, but first, an I-team investigation. One major artery cutting through Cincinnati also has a reputation as a pipeline for dealers to traffic drugs hundreds of miles north and south. 9 on your side I-team reporter Hillary Lake explains why monitoring drug movement in the so-called pipeline is a major challenge for law enforcement from metro areas to small rural communities.
Detectives tell me the heroin epidemic in big cities like Cincinnati trickles down to smaller towns up and down this heroin highway.
Look just past the roadsides of I-75. Half an hour south of Cincinnati, you'll find Grant County, Kentucky. A quiet place with a problem rolling in from the highway.
It's really frustrating.
The chief sheriff's deputy, who's also a brand new dad, is trying to fight it.
Hey, is Chuck still here? They're traveling to Cincinnati. They're getting their heroin. They're pulling over somewhere between Cincinnati and here and using it. So by the time they get here, they're, going into the overdose phase where everything's starting to shut down.
Brian Maines and his entire team are now prepared to do more than make arrests.
Well, I just keep it right here in the door so that it's readily accessible.
They also revive heroin overdoses.
Your Narcan with your aspirator to inject it.
Maines explains 9 people have overdosed in Grant County so far this year.
In the last week, we've had 1 overdose death.
That might not seem like a lot compared to 80 overdoses and 3 deaths in Cincinnati just this week, but it is for a county that only 30,000 people call home.
I can't imagine wanting to use again after overdosing, but we see it every day.
The reality is no one really knows how much heroin is flowing up and down the road that connects Grant County to Cincinnati and even bigger cities like Detroit and Chicago.
And if we get some kind of networking together, maybe we can get a handle on who these users are and try to get it back to the source of the drugs.
A source that currently stumps law enforcement in the Hamilton County Heroin Coalition Task Force in Cincinnati. Its leader thinks someone is distributing the newest batch of the deadly cocktail on purpose.
And I want to send a message out to whoever is putting this drug on the street. You have our full and undivided attention.
Grant County doesn't have a drug task force. Sherman Baptist Church isn't far from the interstate. Its pastor is starting one.
We need to find the source. If, for example, you're not going to do anything by getting the little fish.
It's personal for Pastor Bob Tarasiak. He's a former drug addict.
Heroin is very inexpensive. $10 or so, you can get enough to get you high. The problem is what's in it.
Chief Deputy Maines knows that risk too.
With the fentanyl and this elephant tranquilizer they're talking about, you don't know if it's going to absorb through your skin and cause you to OD as well.
Since drug traffic is still moving on down the road, he also knows he'll give more doses of Narcan until it stops.
We're doing it for the family and for that person, hoping that they'll get help.
Both Chief Deputy Maines and Pastor Tarasiak tell me the only way to get a handle on this epidemic is through education and involving the community in fighting it. Back to you.
All right, thanks, Hillary. We want to bring in 2 of our panelists right now. Joining me right now, Captain Maurice Robinson with the Cincinnati Police Department. Sir, thank you so much for being here. State Representative Denise Driehaus here as well. Thank you both for making time on this Friday evening. This is a very important topic right now. It obviously major headlines, not only here in Ohio and in the Tri-City, in the Tri-State area, nationally. People are talking about Ohio right now, not necessarily the way we would want them to talk. Our 9 on Your Side, WCPO.com editorial board is calling on Governor Kasich to make funds available and declare this an emergency. I know Representative Driehaus, you had called for that same request of the governor, some $400 million. What is the focus? For $400 million, what do you hope that that money would focus on?
Well, it's a couple things actually. First of all, we've got $2 billion in the rainy day fund, and so $400 million is just a part of what we've got there. I would hope that some of it would go to supply the Narcan that the emergency and the first responders need to save the lives. First of all, I mean, first and foremost, that's what we're trying to do. In addition to that, though, there are so many things that are being underfunded right now because once you save that life, you need to provide some treatment and supports so that person isn't in the same situation again. And that, I think, is where the state of Ohio has fallen behind, frankly. And so I'm hoping that if we can get some funds released through the controlling board, which can easily be done, that we can start to address it in a real way. We've got some great policies. I've been part of some laws that have been passed, but we really need to fund it.
I mean, the city of Cincinnati, $125,000 extra dollars to go to the Cat House, Center for Addiction Treatment, to expand. They're going through a major expansion right now where they can help some 6,000 people a year. When you see that number, they're tripling their capacity of people to help. That just tells you the problem we're seeing. What more resources do you need, sir, out in the police force and on the ground to not only help your officers, but help this situation?
As much as anything else, we need the public to let us know when they know who a drug dealer happens to be. My job by its very nature is apprehension and interdiction. So being in charge of the special investigations section, I'm responsible for the narcotics unit. And we've also reached out to work with our other local partners. I have 2 of my officers assigned to the Hamilton County Heroin Task Force. I have people assigned with the DEA. I've got people assigned with the Regional Enforcement Narcotics Unit, or RENU. So we're doing all that we can from our side from an interdiction and an apprehension perspective.
But you need those people to speak up. You need people to say, hey, this guy's dealing out here on this corner.
Absolutely. And as importantly, people that suffer from overdoses need help as well. Because effectively you're playing today's version of Russian roulette if you start using heroin.
People that turn this into a political issue, and let's face it, this campaign season, people are going to be talking about this. There's a lot of talk and not a lot of action sometimes when these events happen. How do you convince people to do the right thing?
Well, so first of all, I think we need to talk about this in terms of the addiction that it is and make sure that we remove the stigma so that we can make those funds available. Because if you really want to get to the issue, there are 3 prongs. There's the detox that you mentioned, the Cat House. The $2 million that they're getting to expand, part of that came from the state. So we were serious about that expansion. But then you need to have the treatment and then the support afterwards, because without one of those 3, oftentimes you fail. And you talk to any professional in the field and they'll tell you that. That takes resources and a real commitment from the state, in addition to the policies that we've been just talking about. The money needs to be there, it needs to follow.
And of course, money needs to go to the police department as well for resources. You guys are using Narcan, and you need other things out there.
Sure, absolutely. And the other thing that we're doing is we're spending a lot of money on overtime getting our officers out on the street, trying to do the apprehension piece. That's what we do best.
Yeah, I know it's a huge issue with budget issues for cities and communities and counties trying to figure out how to fight this, because that impacts other things as well. I know our time is short here right now, but I think this discussion is obviously very important. Denise Driehaus, by the way, is running for county commission. Your opponent in that race is also tackling the heroin crisis. Dennis Dieters recommends following the approach used in Colerain Township. Here's what he had to say.
This pairs a police officer with an EMT and a treatment professional to visit individuals who have recently overdosed.
This 3-prong approach to helping heroin users is also being studied on the state level as well. Again, we are going to continue this conversation still ahead on Halting Heroin. A 9 on Your Side at 7 special report tackling the heroin crisis on the front lines. The volunteers taking matters into their own hands. And there are ways you can support efforts to curb those overdoses out there. There's an over-awareness and the War on Drugs Tomorrow event that begins at noon in Hamilton. Stay right here.